All started with the death of my father, actually, March 2021. I lost my dad. He had dementia for a few years beforehand. And well, it's important to add that 6 days later, my son was born, and I was struck by this realization that they would obviously never meet. So I think one very simple thing I would say we could all do is, how do you create space? Well, how do we converse these days? Maybe create a separate family WhatsApp group and start a different kind of conversation where it's about, hey, mum, dad, granddad, I really want to capture something about your school days. Tee it up, put some nice old photos in, take an old photo and say, what was happening on this day?
Welcome to The Power of Family, the podcast where we help families talk, listen, and connect across generations. I'm your host, Terry Willis. Today's podcast is one that might stop you in your tracks. We're talking about the conversations family often avoid, the questions we think we'll ask someday, but never do, and what happens when that someday never comes. I'm joined by Neil Taylor, founder of Me and My Old Man, who is helping families sit down, ask the questions that matter, and preserve the stories that might otherwise be lost forever. Before we begin, if you believe in stronger families and deeper connections, I'd truly appreciate it if you subscribe to the podcast and share it with someone who needs this message. It helps us continue creating content that makes a real difference. Hi, Neil. Welcome to the Power Family Podcast. Neil, I just have to ask you from the very beginning, how did you get involved in this work?
All started with the death of my father, actually, March 2021. I lost my dad. He had dementia for a few years beforehand. And well, it's important to add that 6 days later, my son was born, and I was struck by this realization that they would obviously never meet. And it was up to me to pass on my dad's story, the essence of the man, to the grandson that he would never meet. And that stuck with me. And in my grief, and actually 4 years later, I started this project called Me and My Old Man to help families capture their parents' life stories.
Well, I have to say this. When I read your bio, when I visited your website, I felt it was just so profound that the work that you've done. Why? Because I'm not exactly on your track, but we're going down that same highway together. And my situation is that it's that disconnect with grandchildren. That's what got me involved in all. But yet, grandchildren and parents, it's all family, Neil. So that's what made us reach out to you, because we said, this man is just doing the right thing. He's doing what so many of us have lost a sense of knowing how to do. And that's bridging that gap, trying to bridge that conversation back between us. And what you're doing is that you're trying to keep the stories alive. Tell us about that part.
Yeah, I love the word you use when you say bridging. It's exactly what it's about. So what I'm finding is that, so what it is, what I built is a 12-week experience where I get busy adults, midlifers, people in the sandwich generation, if you've ever heard that phrase, sandwich between young children and aging parents and busy lives, right? I get them to sit down and stop. And for 12 weeks, I interview them, their siblings, and their parents. Their parents is a long form interview, 3 sessions, 2 hours each. We really just dig into their life. So this could be you, Terry. I sit down with you for 6 hours, having already spoken to your children. At the end of it, what you get is an audiobook with all of the music, all of the transitions, and it's your story in your voice. And the final part of the experience is actually to get you all together again after you've listened. So it's making that space again, making sure this happens from beginning to end in that 12 weeks. So everyone sits down, they make time to think and reflect and to talk about their loved one, and for the parent to talk about themselves. And then we get together and we hold space and hear how people felt about that journey, what they reflected on, what they see in themselves. And it's talking about grandchildren, because I know that's where you're coming in. That relationship is so special. I think what this does is makes it possible to make that connection deeper. So I think when we're young, we see our grandparents as, they're elderly people. It's a magical relationship, but it can also be this vision of someone who's older, who you might not bridge that gap. But when you hear their story, when you hear of them at your age, if you're 10 years old, if you hear of your granddad when he's 10, and the fact that he had to walk 2 miles to school, and he, had this really itchy uniform, and his mother used to always make him go. And then on Sundays, he would have to go to church, and whatever these rituals are, you get to know the man. You can identify with that and you can connect.
Sure. So well do I connect, because I had the elders in my family in which I had to deal with as a young person. And now I find myself to be that elder in the family now. And I can reflect back on the times when I was coming up and I used to see those older people and now I realize what they were doing how they were trying to guide me and lead me and direct me and just educate me to life itself. It all comes to you as time goes by. So what can families do that can hold them together?
What can they do? They can make space. I think it's something that, there was an early part of this project where I wondered if there was a room for me. A bit of imposter syndrome was coming in. I thought, who am I to come into this family unit and try and, get these conversations out, get these stories out? Surely the family can do it themselves. And very quickly, within 2 families, let's say, I realized that it was helpful for me to be there. But a large part of what the experience does is it just makes space. And that's what we find difficult. We find it difficult to change gears and to make space for this. So I think one very simple thing I would say we could all do is, how do you create space? Well, how do we converse these days? WhatsApp. Let's just choose WhatsApp. You have a family WhatsApp group. Maybe create a separate family WhatsApp group and start a different kind of conversation where it's not, are you picking up the kids, mum? Can you pick up my kids on Friday? Can you take them to ball? Can you take them to practice? Or, who's bringing the food on Sunday for lunch? Make it a different space where it's about, hey, mum, dad, granddad, I really want to capture something about your school days. Tee it up, put some nice old photos in, take an old photo and say, what was happening on this day? What do you remember waking up that morning? Changing gears is something that is really important. So making space and changing gears, it doesn't come naturally at first, but when it does, you open the door and you have new conversations.
I saw where you have on your site that you've interviewed 30 plus families.
Yeah.
30 plus families.
Yeah.
Have you seen a moment where one conversation changed a family completely?
Oh, good question. One conversation. I think there's something that happened recently which surprised me. And it wasn't one conversation. It was the experience itself. And it was actually, where I'm coming at this from is I'm an adult who lost their parent and feels like I didn't capture his stories. You're right. There was the passing, being the bridge. I'm now the bridge, right, to part of the. Yes. The riverbank is, it doesn't connect to the other riverbank because my dad passed away. But I'm that bridge, and I miss not capturing his stories, and I feel the effect of not passing it on to my grandson. So the experience started, and then I realized so I was interviewing the children, a group of siblings, let's say. And recently what I realized in a feedback was that these siblings hadn't connected each other. They now live across continents. They've got their own families. Of course, they're part of a core family. But the experience actually brought them together because they got to hear their experience, their sister and brother's experience of the child from a different perspective. So they were sort of 6 years apart in age. And they realized they actually had quite different childhoods because one had left for school and one was still the youngest. And that, they said that it established a connection that they'd never had before. And for me, this is like a wow moment. I was like, okay, this is not what I intended. It's a lovely unintended consequence of the experience, is that when you do take time to sit down, slow down, and make space for a different kind of conversation, you can have more empathy. You feel like you understand someone better, and you see them as just another, a child doing their best in the world, even though they might be 40 years old.
And that conversation that you bridge together between them leads me to ask you this. What are the most common things that you hear unsaid between parents and adult children?
Unsaid.
Is there a such thing as the most common thing that goes unsaid? Because you speak of the family that were living across the continent from each other, and they had that disconnect going on for years. So, but you brought them back together again. Now, is there or was there a moment in time when they shared those words that if you would have, if we could have, what would those words have been for them that people listening to this show may think and possibly apply to their own lives someday? Because they're missing this right now. And I'm asking this because if they're missing this right now, and if they're listening to this podcast, then they're trying to find that connecting piece. That's why I'm asking, what could have been those unsaid words? Could have been.
Yeah, I think it's probably this. I think it's that we all spend a lot of time in our own heads, in our own lives, in our own problems, in our own struggles, right? And when you take the moment, when you take time to recognize that someone else is going through their own same struggles, their own same problems, and that person might be your brother, might be your parent even. So I think what was left unsaid or what could have been done is taking time to really hear your brother's story, really ask him about how did he find it when he first went to school? Or how did he find it when he didn't have any friends in that period. Because you're understanding your perspective on your brother's life is going to be different from his. You don't really know what happened. But when you show that, when you create that space, show that interest, show that empathy, and importantly, shut up and listen.
Listen, it's very important.
That's when things change. I think that's a lot about what I do is like bringing someone who just really wants to know more and listen with empathy is something that we find difficult. And it's funny when I come to sometimes in the wrap-up session. So I've spoken to them individually. I might speak to a son for an hour, and I speak to the dad for 6 hours. They've both listened to each other's chapters. We come back at the end, and I'll ask the dad a question and start talking. And then because of the nature of our family relationships, our conversations, we know we've heard the story 100 times, Dad, like get a move on, finish the sentence. At times I've heard children interrupt their parents and vice versa. And I'm sitting there with this new way of seeing things. And I'm thinking, listen, we just need to listen here. And I think that's something that's difficult because it's not natural. But when we do, things change.
And you said it's not natural. Why do families drift apart even when there's that family love between them? Why? Is there such thing as a common why?
I love the word drifting. I mean, I don't like the word. It's a trend or it's an occurrence that I've recognized. And I've started to think about it like this, that, no one stopped loving each other. We just drifted apart, which is quite a sad, poetic thought. And I think what I've noticed is a few things. So one is often geography. So we might be living in the next town. We might be living in the next state in a different country.
My situation?
Is that your situation?
Yeah.
How far away?
Several states about 700 miles apart.
Okay. So I don't know how you find it, but when that happens, your interactions are very specific. So they will either be a phone call, a video call of some sort, or you have a physical visit, where it's high pressured, kind of intense. It's a 2-day window, a weekend where lots is happening, and you're fitting into the lives of your children and your grandchildren. And that's a difficult place to play for a grandparent, but also the parents in the middle, and just getting the right balance. There's a certain window of time which is perfect. I don't know if it's a day, 2 days, 4 days. You're all living in the same house. It's difficult, and people have different energy levels, right? I think that's one of the things that changes when you live abroad. So geography can be a reason for the drift. That's not to say you don't have a special time. I'm sure you have magical moments with all of the family in those trips. I think another thing is just the creation of a new family unit. What we've got to realize is that the midlife is the sandwich generation, as I like to call them, sandwich between young children and aging parents. It's a fast-paced world these days. It's faster than it was before, but it'll be even faster, in the next generation. They're just juggling and spinning a lot of plates and really trying to find their own way. Whatever is happening to them is a new thing for them. They're being a parent of a 9-year-old is a new thing for them. A parent of a 15-year-old is a new thing for them. They might have a new job. They might just move somewhere. And them having a parent who's 80 is also a new thing for them. So there's that's their reality. And likewise, you as a grandparent, Terry, you have it's the first time you're however old with the child and the grandchild, and there's these different things that we're all making sense of. But I think this new family unit is a thing where that's now the focus. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is whilst that's happening and being very aware of that busyness, I'm trying to say to people, please don't lose the opportunity to sit down with your parents and value them as role models and value their story, because it really is going to show you a light which you might not be looking at. You might be reading an autobiography. You might be following the latest CEO. You might be following these other kinds of role models, but why not look at your parent there who's raised you and loved you and still loves you? I think by sitting down to ask them about their story in an objective way can be a really powerful way to bridge that gap, because you then you humanize them. You see them as they're just our parents are, who are 70, 75, 80. They're also just young children inside, just trying to work out their new thing, So yeah, geography, family unit, to answer your question, parts of drift, and I think just navigating, that relationship. The relationship evolves. This is a question I like to ask to the parents: is how do you look back on the stages of your parenthood? So you were a parent of, you were a new parent. You're a first-time parent. You were a new parent. You're a parent of toddlers, of teenagers. How was that? Then you were an empty nester. They left the house or they stayed at home, and now you're a parent of potentially a 40-year-old, 30-year-old. Who has their own children. How's that? And you're also a grandparent. So all these stages, everyone's growing in different ways. And I think it's important to respect everyone else's growth, but also take an interest in their journeys from a very empathetic, non-judgmental point of view. So that requires grandparent to look at child and, be attentive to what they're going through. But I think for the sandwich, the one that's sandwiched in the middle, it's opening their eyes a little bit up to, don't forget mum and dad, and show some interest in what they're going through. I think that's where, but they're busy. So it's a tough one.
Well, you just made a point there about don't forget mom and dad and showing them some interest. From my experience and everything I'm doing, and I'm working hard and I'm trying to build for my grandkids, but they don't understand it right now. Where does one, or how does one, where you just made the statement about find time for your grandparents, how does one explain that to younger people these days? Because you just made the statement about the fact that life is changing and what things that interest young people today, we didn't have that interruption in our lives, but we know that life evolves and technology evolves, and that is why they're moving at the pace they're moving, because of technology. So what I'm searching for here is that how does young adults maintain that connection with the older adults and keep without interfering in their lives? Is there such a thing?
May I ask, what do you observe as a grandparent? I'm intrigued. So what's the struggle? What do you find the struggle to communicate with? Is that centered around technology or distraction or different sort of world experience, or how does that?
I'm going to answer that personally, but I've listened to enough elders speak now, and it's derived around different issues. But I'm going to speak from my perspective. And my perspective has been that gap in time where I wasn't there, I guess, by their sides, or taking them out to those games, or taking them to those programs which they attended. That's what I noticed when we brought my granddaughter on this podcast. It was one of the first podcasts that we had here. She said something that just left all of our mouths hanging open, and we were off the air. But she said one of her first words were, "Where were you?" And it just took us all by surprise. It took me by surprise, because I've been communicating with them over the time in which they were growing up. Well, of course, they had their dad and their mom. But when she said that to me, I was floored. And that's why I say that I am a living experience of what I'm doing here. And I'm still trying to find ways to reconnect with me still being at a distance away. Whatever I experience, I know others are experiencing. And that's why I came up with this program, came up with the Power of Family, because I said, it's not just me. I was aware of that. Do something, just like you felt that you had to do something here. So that is my position with it's the distance, and it's always going to be the distance as long as I'm away and they're away. That's just a fact of life. But yet that I know that with technology, we can bridge that gap. We can have more of that conversation, especially when we can visually see each other. We just can't see and feel the touch of being with each other, but we can still manage. And so that's where my situation was born from. It's the distance between us. But yet I'm still searching for it, even though she knows it and I know it. We're still searching. And it's not just one grandchild. It's several of them. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's a big moment. It's nice to hear the personal story. I read about it, but I didn't know it was on a conversation and it floored you in that way. Yeah, I mean, what does she think about what you're doing now, though? Is this not a demonstration of how much you care because of the project?
Yes, because she was younger at the time. She's a few years older now. She's about less than 25, but she's beginning to understand more about granddaddy being away. But even though she's beginning to understand even more, she's not there yet. So I'm still wrestling with how do I keep this family unit together in spite of granddaddy not being there to take her on her outings.
Okay. You just made me think of a couple of practical things, and I think that's what you're searching for a lot is practical things, right, Terry?
Sure.
So one thing this one family, actually the same family I was mentioning, they do is they are in Canada, France, and the UK. That's the three siblings, and the parents go from France to UK. Every Sunday night at 6 p.m, they have a Zoom call. I think there's not a rule, but ever since they started it, they all attend. And there's no reason for attending. There's no topic, but they connect every week for an hour. And I thought it was just a magical thing because I live away from my core family as well. And I think that's just a great way to put a placeholder in your diary So then I since then have sort of copied that idea with my friends, with my best friends. That I read a book by Sahil Bloom called The 5 Types of Wealth. And it's very much not about monetary wealth. It's about social wealth, mental well-being. Can't remember the other three. Financial is one of them. In that book, he talks about this concept of front row friends, which are the friends that will be in the front row at your funeral. And I thought it was a lovely concept. Yeah, so this concept of front row friends, I copied, and basically the idea of allocating time in your life the way it works for you. Because I think what happens is weeks and days pass by and I don't call my mum. And if I do, it seems a bit rushed, or if she calls me, it's a bit rushed. So by allocating time and placing importance on it, you say, this is important to me. So I said, these people in my life are important to me. So 6 friends that I went to school with every other Friday for an hour. I blocked in the diary, and whoever can come joins. And they just turn up. Well, a face appears, and you're like, oh, cool, it's you. And you talk. And it's important because I think, in my life as a man and my 40s, it's difficult to make new friendships. I live away from my country I grew up in, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of copied that idea of allocating time. I think that's something that families can do if they're distanced, is to create that time on the weekend where we sit down, we all see each other, and it's so nice, record the session, record you laughing and having a joke. It's a special thing. The other thing I thought of was, before you said this granddaughter was sort of around 25, I was thinking, and you may do actually have grandchildren who are, say, 8 years old or 12 years old. There's a friend of mine who started this business called Tell Me, and essentially helping children create podcasts. So because I was thinking, why doesn't your granddaughter get involved in this project more? And that could be your way of bonding. I guess the point is around common interests. But with this project, Tell Me, so young children within a safe platform, completely protected, can draft up scripts, record their voice, put in little music, and create their own stories. But how about you do that with your grandfather, who can now do this kind of thing in a different state? And you can collaborate around a project which is online, and they can come back from school and see that, oh, you've uploaded a new script, or you found a new music song. So I think the point really there is about common interests, and it just occurred to me that my friend runs this thing which sounds amazing.
And I'm working towards that. I'm working towards getting them involved in one aspect or another. It takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. That said, next question I'd like to pose to you: what do aging parents wish their children would ask them, but rarely say out loud? Rarely will the grandparents say it out loud, but they wish their children would ask them. It could be aging parents or grandparents, because I think of myself as the grandparent here.
Well, one thing is death, isn't it? It's not a nice topic.
Yes, it is.
It's not a nice topic between
the inevitable.
Yeah. The only thing that's guaranteed in life is death.
Yes, the inevitable. Yes.
I think, death in my life has changed the course of what I'm doing with my day to day. It's changed the things I focus on, right? This is an absolute passion, and my life's purpose really is to help families reconnect as you're doing. It's death sharpened that, right? Death focuses you on what's important. There's a book by Oliver Burkeman called 4,000 Weeks. That's essentially the average number of weeks we all have on this planet. So I think death is a really important thing that we shy away from, and even in my dad's case, right? So this is born out my new professional gig, but I don't speak about my dad that much with my sisters. His anniversary was this month. We sent a few messages to each other. I didn't actually speak to my sisters on that day. I think in this Anglo-Saxon Western culture, at least, there's a sort of a barrier. We can't talk about it until it comes. When it comes, we then can't talk about it, and it's sort of just hidden away. So I think this is a question which, because it's so prevalent for someone when you are aging and your friends are passing away, you're going to more funerals and weddings, as the saying goes. You're conscious of your mortality when you're 70, much more than when you're 40. And I think I'm seeing it in my mum now, and I'm able to talk to her about it because of this project and the fact that I'm thinking about it all the time. I'm very conscious that she's feeling close to things, and I'm trying to help her to understand what she wants to do to be happy and what makes her happy. And there's so much richness and insight in that aging mind, because their focus is sharpened. They know what's important. So I think that's probably an area which I think grandparents would love to. It's a difficult topic because it's not about you not being here and you dying, grandma, mum, dad. It's about focusing on what's important.
What did you wish you had asked your dad before he passed away? Speaking of you,
I'd like to know about his failings. What did he see as his weaknesses? Because again, in that's where you learn who you really are. He was a very, on the paper, successful man. He was a very loving father. If he wasn't, I wouldn't be doing this probably. he also had difficult things happen to him, but he was part of a generation where that wasn't discussed. He opened up in his later years, but from very personal things to losing his sight in one eye when he was 11. He was on a run at school, and someone flicked a bush by accident in front of him as they were running through the woods, and the thorn went straight into his eye, and so he had to have it taken out without anesthetic. I mean, we talked about it, and he actually talked. He talked about the incident and the fact that he couldn't see, and if he would be putting a glass on the table, he might not get the perspective of getting the glass down correctly. So that was there. And he also lived away from his parents. He went to boarding school. He was sent from Asia over to the UK, age 8, on a boat with his 6-year-old brother and no parents. And then he went to boarding school, and he was sort of almost like a dad, aged 8, looking after his younger brother. And he was a very warm person and very tactile. But I just wonder that struggle and that growing up, how he reflected on that and how that shaped him. Because what we need to understand is that whatever shaped him has shaped me.
Exactly.
And we kind of cognitively get it, right? We know that there's a bit of our mum in us, and she's shy, so sometimes I'm shy, or she stutters a little bit when she gets nervous, and so do I. Those things. I think what we struggle to see, unless we take the time and make space to hear their story, is we don't see that really their life experiences have shaped our life experiences and how we see the world. And we might want to deny that, or we might resist it, but really, in this example, my dad's experience of having a stiff upper lip and having determination to get through these things shaped who he was, and therefore how he became a 30-year-old and a 40-year-old and a 50-year-old, and therefore how he parented and wanted to show me determination. I had a call just an hour ago finished up with a family, and it was a very independent. Well, actually, it just came out. This just shows you. So I spent 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. They live in San Francisco, Amsterdam, and London. The dad lives in the UK as well. He was a very successful advertising man, working with all the big brands that you'd heard about, Apple and Steve Jobs and et cetera, in those kinds of rooms. And he always fostered independence. He said it was very important for his kids to be independent. And he also was very independent, lived in Hong Kong, And so I interviewed, we did the sessions for 6 hours, and it was clear that was the case. That came across to me. But only in this session just an hour ago did he say something which I hadn't realized, which was that he was saying, it was so important for me to foster independence and you be free and feel like you could do anything with confidence and determination. And he goes, it's probably because, I was an only child, and there was always this question of, where's David? Where's David? Where has he gone? Is he in the other room? Is he okay? So he said he felt oppressed by his parents, who were loving, but he just felt like he was being watched the whole time. And so, after he'd finished what he was saying, I said, he asked for my opinion, which is not normally something I do. I'm not there to give my opinions. I'm there to create space. And I said, my observation is that I hadn't realized that your independence, I wish I'd asked you before in our sessions where this came from. Where do you think this was important to you? Why was this important to you? I didn't, but you've just told me the answer now, which is that I think from what you said is you felt like you didn't have the space to grow into what you wanted to be. And that experience, age 6, then became your modus operandi. Wow. And your approach to parenting, and has just shaped 3 other human beings. And it's almost like he didn't even know it. And so, it's also an interrogation of ourselves and understanding ourselves. This journey, these kinds of journeys can foster.
And that's that wow moment that we have for those of us who search for it and understanding what family truly means. And I commend you for the work that you've done in picking up that mantle, because you represent life on a continuum from one generation to the next, and you are recording those stories so that families can hear them and build from them and lean on them. And thank you for doing that, because as I'm now on this journey myself, I see it missing in so many lives, because I'm talking to a lot of elders now, and I feel their emotions, I feel their pains, I feel their smiles. And just to know that someone is doing something about it somewhere, all of our efforts add to the whole. And thank you for it.
Thank you.
It does. All of our efforts. And thank you for sharing that about your dad as well. So do you have any, and I know you do you have any specific tools that you work with to share with families or to share with those who visit your site or anything? What tools do you utilize?
Yes. I mean, I have one key, there's the experience. So there's the 12-week experience. But even just coming to the website, you'll find that there's I've got this guide, which is the 10 questions to ask your parents before it's too late, which is a slightly a sort of negative angle on it, but it's really trying to capture the moment. But in that guide, what you also have is, I mean, there's more than 10 questions, but what you have is also scripts and ways to handle objections. So there's a ways to handle if your parent seems a bit reluctant or apprehensive or doesn't want to share the story. There's ways and languages to use to get around that, because I really just want to get people started. I've got lots of other resources which I'll make available soon. And I'm also, because of the so many conversations I'm having, I've had 350 hours of interviews with families. I'm starting to see the patterns of the types that we have. One being, for example, sort of the closed book dad. The dad who's, he just doesn't seem to share anything personal about himself. You've got a potted history of his life, but you don't know the depths of that. And so I'm sort of building materials around how to unlock that kind of person in your family in a nice way. What is it that's holding them back, and what is it that you can do, and what can you ask to prise that open. But yeah, the first resource that I've got, which has been very popular, is this 10 questions to ask your parents.
And speaking of the dad or the parent who isn't open, how do you approach a parent who isn't open to naturally expressing themselves? Again,
it's the challenge is we are stuck in these gears, right? So there was one son that I've spoken to. He hasn't yet, hopefully, engaged me to help him out. We're going to catch up next month. He said he talked about his dad is the guy in the room who tells great stories, right? Everyone sits back and laughs at these stories. And the son has heard the same story, obviously, 100 times in different rooms throughout his life, right? Mm-hmm. But he says he still doesn't really know anything about him. There's always a story about his other friend at school or his other friend at college. And he's like, I love my dad. But he's deflecting something here. Like, what happened? What happened? What did you do in your life? I don't really know. I mean, so I think, and he says that it was quite sad, really. He sort of said, at times I've had in my mind that we'll go walk down to the pub in England, the bar, and on the walk there, I'm sort of, he says he's, having a pep talk. He's like, when we get there, I'm going to ask him some questions. And then he sort of gives up on the way. He gives up on the way because he just knows that he's going to get the same answer, the same deflection. So I think my encouragement would be, you have to change that gear and find a space for it to work. Obviously, don't come out of the blue and say, hey, Dad, what's your first childhood memory? Because he's going to come in cold. But explain your why. So this is another thing I have in the guidance is around, how to set it up. So tell them why it's important to you. Tell your parent why you care, why you want to know about their story, because there is part of that generation which don't want to share. They feel no one's ever asked them, so it feels alien to them, and they might be suspicious even. Why are you asking that? Why do you want to know? And they feel like they can't. But it's important to share why. It's because I love you, and because there's so much about your life that I don't really know about. The kids, your grandkids, are quite young, and I just want them to know you as well. Maybe that's often the reason. And so I think sharing your why and your motivations is the first thing to do in this instance when you want to show interest, because then it disarms them, and they just realize that actually it's not really about them in a way. It's about their life, but it's about the connection with your grandkids and you understanding them and yourself. Okay.
What surprised you most about the 30 plus families in which you've interviewed? Is there one or two things that surprised you about those many stories?
Yes. Okay. So the first moment of surprise was in the second family I spoke to. And this is where I was unsure what this was going to be, whether it was going to be a podcast, whether it was going to continue, whether it was going to be my business and life's work. And what surprised me was this is when I only did 2-hour sessions with the parent. I did 4 hours with this dad, who was a fantastic storyteller, loving man, very articulate about his love for his children, just a really lovely, lovely person. And he shared a lot, and he didn't need much prompting. We came to the final session with my friend and the dad, and kind of out of nowhere, I think he almost interrupted me. I think that's what I remember. And then he just started telling the story about a dream that he had with his dad. So he just jumped into it. He said, yeah, I remember this dream that I had. I was there, and my dad came up to me, and he was wearing his green tweed jacket that he always used to wear. And he held out his hand, and I grabbed his hand, and we just started walking. And he was really real. He was in 3D. This is what he's saying. He was 3D. It was the most real dream I've ever had. And then I woke up, and it was so wistful and wonderful and magical. I had shivers. I have shivers every time I tell the story. So I got off the phone, we got off the call, and I was struck by this moment. I thought, we've just spoken for 4 hours, which I thought, at the beginning, I was the second person I'd done it for. That was quite a long time, talking about just his life. And it surprised me that that kind of thing didn't come out. So it just showed me that how much space you have to create for this, how much space and time to listen with empathy for these things to come out. And the interesting thing also is that I then called my friend and said, listen, had you had that story before? And he said, no, I've never had that before. And I thought, well, this thing has to continue, because if that story would never have been heard before, then I need to be here to bring that story out. So
had that space not been created.
Yeah.
So what is the best way to create that space for conversations?
Well, it's starting with the why. So you need to start with why this is important to you and reflect on it. And to answer your previous question, I think one of the other surprises I had was interviewing the children started because I needed a bit of a reference point on the parents' life. I needed to learn a little bit about where they've been through so I could ask the right questions. It started as that, actually. And then when I realized it was actually it was a connection point. And so the fifth family, there was a daughter who had recorded a session, and I'd done the dads. In that case, it was a dad. I also do mums, by the way. And she'd listened to all the sessions, and she called me up. She goes, I've just listened to my one. And she left a voice note. She said, I just listened to my hour, and I know it was me speaking, and obviously I know what I said, but actually hearing back my own voice talking about how much I admire and respect my dad was just a really nice experience. And so I was surprised that had such an impact on her. Like her spending the time to reflect, talk, record, and then listen back. So 4 things on her own feelings was a deeper experience than she'd probably ever had about her dad as an adult. So again, it's just creating space and time for us to actually think about things, the people that we love most. Yeah.
As we begin to wind down here, I've been thinking about that one question to ask you, because I could keep listening and listening and listening, because everything in which you're sharing with me, it's so many takeaways for me. Because as I said, I'm moving down that lane with you. We're just on different roads. And what is the one conversation every family should have before it's too late? I know that's a heavy one. It's kind of like talking about that death thing. People don't want to talk about it, but it's coming. So what is that one conversation that Neil thinks people should have?
The question I like to ask, which is as close as an answer I'm going to give you right now in this moment, and there's so many good questions, is what do you believe to be the ingredients to a good life? Because that forces a response from your parents that can act as a guiding light for you. It doesn't frame it as regrets. It doesn't frame it as in what do you wish you did differently. It doesn't talk about your dreams. It says to the parent, right, you're 80 years old now. You've lived a life. What do you believe made that life happy and joyful? And I think the response to that can almost be your blueprint to where you should focus your time.
Thank you for that. Thank you for those lingering thoughts. If a person, our listeners, if they wish to connect with you, how best do they do that?
So they can go to the website, which is meandmyoldman.co.uk. meandmyoldman.co.uk. I'm also on Instagram, which is under my name. So that's Neil, Neilp Taylor _ ILPTAYLOR _ And I'm also on LinkedIn. But from those 2 sources, the website and Instagram, you'll get an idea of all of the stories, the resources. It's only going to grow with the help of you and these kinds of conversations. And I really hope to connect with anyone who's interested.
I'm going to do my best to help it grow.
Thank you, Terry.
Truly. Thank you for your time, Neil.
Thank you.
And we look forward to inviting you back some other time in the future.
Oh, I'd love to. More stories.
Yes, because our stories only grow from here. Thank you.
I got you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Cheers.
Before we close, I want to leave you with this. Families don't fall apart because they don't care. They struggle when they don't feel heard, understood, or safe enough to speak honestly. If something from today's conversation resonated with you, I invite you to pause and think about one small conversation you can have this week. One question, one check-in, one moment of listening without fixing. If this episode was meaningful, please subscribe to The Power of Family. Share it with someone you love or send it to your family group chat. You can find more episodes and resources at thepowerofamilyus.com. Until next time, keep showing up, keep listening, and keep building connection. This is Terry Willis. Thanks for being here.